mode.
Good morning. Welcome to the monthly Kauffman FastTrac author series. We are thrilled to have a wonderful author with us today, and I'll introduce Kevin in just a moment. Let me start by welcoming all of you. We are really thrilled with this author series, and as many of you been with us on this journey, you probably noticed that we are getting just some wonderful experienced entrepreneurs and authors to join us, and Kevin certainly is that. Kevin Johnson is the president of Johnson Media and a serial entrepreneur himself. He has several years of experience leading his multi-million-dollar marketing and communications company that now serves many of the most notable Fortune 100 businesses. As an innovative leader, he's appeared on ABC's Good Morning America, CBS, Oprah Radio, featured in the New York Times, as well as the Wall Street Journal. Moreover, Kevin is frequently a guest on CNN. So Kevin, we welcome you. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much. This is an awesome opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the details of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
So thanks to the Kauffman Foundation and all the staff who put this together. Again, it's an awesome opportunity in the foundation, the Kauffman Foundation, that is a top-notch organization. It's a true pleasure to work with you all. So let's get started. So first, let me provide some context and give you a little bit of information about me. I am the president and CEO of Johnson Media, Inc., and my company is an innovative marketing and communications firm that specializes in creating and implementing strategies for our clients. But it hasn't always been that clear-cut. In fact, I started my company while I was a sophomore in college, and we've certainly changed our business model, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But, you know, I never imagined myself being an entrepreneur. You hear often stories of serial entrepreneurs or businessmen and women who started off at, age 5 or 6 selling lemonade and doing various entrepreneurial things. That wasn't me. I always thought that I would end up being a computer programmer for a large company working a regular 9 to 5. So my story, I think, is a little bit different than a lot of stories that you hear of the entrepreneurs that have started since their toddler years, so to speak. So as I matured as an entrepreneur, I realized that much of my success and the success of other entrepreneurs was the result of my ability to transform the way I think. And I think that's key, changing the mind and thereby developing habits, characteristics, and beliefs of great entrepreneurs is so important. One of my favorite paragraphs of the book, and that readers love too, is to be an entrepreneur is to think differently. While most people seek refuge, entrepreneurs take risks. They don't want a job, they want to create jobs. Their goal isn't to think outside the box as much as it is to own the box. Entrepreneurs don't follow the market, they define the market. And this bold and seemingly backward way of thinking I refer to as the entrepreneur mind. And so the title of this presentation is appropriately named The Entrepreneur Mind, which is also the title of the book. So why do I open up with this slide? I took this picture in 2003 at the All-Star Game in Atlanta, Georgia, the NBA All-Star Game. It was Michael Jordan's last game and my first major perk as an entrepreneur. So shortly after I started my company, the NBA hired my firm to market the NBA All-Star Weekend. And as a kid, I always wanted to play in the NBA. That didn't work out so well when I stopped growing, so I hit the books. However, my dream to work for the NBA did come true, and it just came true in a different way. And so the realization of the dream came through entrepreneurship and learning to think like an entrepreneur to achieve my goals. So very quickly, again, Johnson Media is an innovative marketing and communications firm. We were started in 2000. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. Some of our clients include Cadillac and Coca-Cola. Most recently, our focus has been in the financial services industry, working with a lot of major banks, the largest banks in the U.S., and we've won some awards for some of our work in advertising and marketing and communications. But my background is technological, and you'll see that come through as I describe some of these concepts. And a lot of the concepts are very general, but they're coming from my perspective as someone who started out as a computer scientist. And, you know, we've pivoted through the years, and one of the great things about advertising now is that a lot of it is technology-based, so it was a perfect fit, perfect match there. One more slide before we get started. And so this presentation is based on my book. And the book wasn't necessarily something that I set out to do for monetary gain. It was simply to put things in a comprehensive body of work to provide straightforward advice for new and intermediate level entrepreneurs. And so it's done very well. And I think it's done well, and it's been very helpful to budding entrepreneurs because it offers simple, digestible concepts that entrepreneurs, I think, have to master to reach a high level of success. And so it's very pragmatic, not very theoretical. Every reader will gain new ways of thinking that'll help improve his or her business. And so the book identifies 100 key lessons that every entrepreneur must learn in 7 areas: strategy, education, people, finance, marketing and sales, leadership, and motivation. So I've chosen 9 common attributes of great entrepreneurs. My book, again, offers 100, but I've chosen a few to discuss for today's webinar. I often get the question of what a great or an elite entrepreneur is. In my opinion, I think an elite or a great entrepreneur is one who has a highly profitable and sustainable business. It's a very, very simple concept. And I might add that it's a person who's a visionary and quite often is not involved necessarily in the day-to-day operations of the business. In other words, the elite entrepreneur has the unique ability to work on their business and not necessarily in their business to make it thrive. And so I think once you master these principles, that will enable you to become an elite or a great entrepreneur. So principle number 1, it's never too late to be an entrepreneur. You know, considering that the Kauffman Foundation made this presentation possible, I thought it would be most appropriate to start with this principle because it's based in part on the research of the foundation. You know, the media would have you believe that millennials and youngsters are the ones that are the only ones starting businesses, and that other demographics aren't necessarily starting businesses in large numbers. And that's simply not true. It varies from year to year, but as you can see, older demographics start more businesses on a consistent basis. And I think that's awesome news, and there are some key takeaways from that. Older people are starting more businesses than people in their teens and their 20s, and you know, according to this study, I guess between the ages, or Americans between the ages of 35 and 44 represent the largest increase in entrepreneurial activity from 08 to 09 and other periods. And so, you know, Americans 55 to 64, they constituted the largest jump in that period. And so, you know, the reasons range from middle-aged adults wanting to supplement their income to retired individuals wanting to continue work. And that's, I think, indicative of the economy that we're in right now. And so regardless of the reasons, older Americans are catching the entrepreneurial bug, which is good news for everyone. Unfortunately, we just don't hear enough about these exciting data. So a few takeaways from this particular principle. You know, don't be discouraged by the media hype. If you're not a millennial, the entrepreneurial gods are indeed in your favor. And you know, second, use the higher success rates of seasoned entrepreneurs to your advantage, whether you're raising funds or convincing customers. That experience is very important. And if you're younger, definitely be sure to seek out and find older entrepreneurs and advisors who can balance your team. You know, I've seen trends, especially in the investor community, where those teams that have a balanced team, a more diverse team in terms of age, are getting more funding. That's more appealing to investors, angel investors, or any investors. And I know that certainly speaks volumes to me when I'm faced with an opportunity and I'm asked to provide funds to support a particular company or initiative. So principle number 2, and I think this is one of the most important principles of my book. I'm not the only one to espouse this principle because, again, it's so important. Create new markets. If that's the only thing you learn from this presentation, I think you'll be in fairly good hands. Many of you may know the story of the Casella family from Australia that makes the popular wine Yellowtail. And they, through extensive research, realized that young consumers in America particularly tend to avoid what they consider to be confusing and pretentious wine labels, you know, characteristic of older world wine bottles. And so they were able to capitalize on that opportunity and not necessarily create a new market per se, but put a spin on it, so to speak. And so in 2001, they sold over 100,000 cases, and that jumped quickly to almost 8 million cases of wine in 2005, helped by really great distribution and innovative concepts. And so the rest is history. And this is a wonderful case study, pun intended, that I think everyone should look at and draw from in order to help improve their particular business. In general, I think there are 2 kinds of entrepreneurs. There are those who create markets and those who do not. And you certainly want to be an entrepreneur if you can help it that creates a new market. This particular Casella or Yellowtail case is from Blue Ocean Strategy, a wonderful book, one of my favorites, that provides research behind why those new markets win the game in profits. A blue ocean represents a market that is full of opportunity, and conversely, a red ocean is a crowded market that has many competitors, and you're likely to get eaten by sharks in the bloody waters of competition. And so from that wonderful research, the authors looked at, I think, 108 companies that launched new businesses to quantify the impact on revenue growth and the profits of creating blue oceans or new markets. And the findings are quite remarkable. I'll share those with you in brief. And so they found that 86% of the launches were line extensions. That is, incremental improvements within the red ocean of existing market space. Yet they accounted only for 62% of total revenues and a mere 39% of total profits. And the remaining 14% of the launches were aimed at creating blue oceans, and they generated 38% of total revenues and 61% of total profits. So there you have it. There are the data that support the reasoning why you should put your most effort, or the most effort, into creating new markets. And so again, the takeaway is to hone your competitive advantage, pursue new markets and new ideas. It may hurt more in the beginning, but ultimately it's you know, the opportunity that's most valuable. And I learned this in my own experience, and that provided me early on by starting a company that was going after a new market. It really provided the profits to propel my company and help to make it sustainable. You know, one of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford, founder of Ford Motor Company, and he said, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." I love that quote because I think it really captures the essence of this particular principle in creating and going after and being relentless about new markets. So principle 3, the business plan is overrated. You know, I spoke on a college campus recently, and I almost got run off campus. I felt like I was the most reviled person in all of academia. But, you know, it's very true. I think the business plan is overrated. You know, there's been a shift in entrepreneurial thought somewhat, led in academia by colleges like Babson College and others, and influencers like myself. And simply put, we believe that there's probably a bit too much emphasis on writing the business plan, especially as you start your company. And so we feel that there is so much more that should be done before you start typing a business plan or even putting it together. And there are a few exceptions, but for most people, you have plenty of work to do before you even lift that pencil, pen, or sit in front of a computer. And so here are some of the steps that we agree that should take place before you put all of that effort into a business plan. The first being examine the competitive landscape. I quip in my book about several people who have approached me for funds, and I asked them who their competitors are, and they have no idea. Or worse, they know who their competitors are, but they dismiss them because they're a bit, how can I put this, I guess too focused on themselves, and they think that their product is better. And it may be, but you certainly don't want to underestimate your competitors. So examine the competitive landscape, find all of those competitors that can compete for customers. And they may not be only direct competitors. I talk about in my book the economic concept of substitutes. And so it's not always those companies that have the exact business model or exact product or exact service that you have. It could be those competing companies that would serve the needs of the customer in the same way that your product or service would, but for whatever reason, they choose that product. It could be price, it could be quality, or even less quality. So pay close attention to the competitive landscape and know that better than anybody else. Number 2, discuss the idea with potential customers. I think that's super important. Notice that I put in there, or didn't put, to speak with family members, right? You want to find people that have no particular bias towards you, and they'll give you exactly the information that you need that will help you identify what will make your product or service successful. And don't be afraid, right? You know, a lot of us are afraid of failure, but you know, people will save you a lot of time and energy in the process if they can tell you exactly what they would like versus what you think they would like. It doesn't always work that way. And so number 3, develop a prototype and or precise use cases, especially if you're providing a service. I love people who have a prototype. When I'm approached with the idea of investing in a company, those companies that have a prototype or something that I can touch and feel definitely have the competitive advantage. And in fact, it shows me that they've put a lot of effort into that business already, and it may actually have been put before customers. And so that information, all of the information that I've talked about as it relates to the business plan or actions before the business plan, will help to make that business plan a living document, something that's more tangible, something that's real, right? Far too often I come across what I call Franken business plans, or business plans that are an amalgamation of all these different business plans that people just found online or through a software package, and it really doesn't make sense, and the financials don't make sense at all. So don't overwhelm yourself with trying to write a 100-page or long business plan. Get to work and test that idea in the market. And the last thing that I want to say about this particular principle is to find professional help. I often say that if you're the only one to write your business plan, then some of the credibility of that business plan goes out of the window. You know, not everyone understands a balance sheet or the financials or the cash flow, or not everyone's a marketing expert, which I think is the most important part of the business plan, because ultimately you've got to sell the product or service. So find professionals that can help you, that will help to make that business plan very real and very pragmatic. So principle 4, a bad economy is a great opportunity. I don't want to spend too much on this particular principle because I think it's very apparent. During recessions, a lot of the companies that you see on the slide were started. From Apple to Disney to GM to IBM to Microsoft, all of these companies were started during down economy. And so now, since we're in a down economy, is especially a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to take advantage of the opportunities. And, you know, I always tell a lot of my mentees that if you can start a company now and be successful under these conditions, you are really going to thrive once the economy turns around. And so don't hold back. Move forward with all of your might and all aggression to make that business a success. So principle number 5, adopt new technology. And, you know, some of these principles may be very, very apparent, but, you know, sometimes you just need a really good reminder of what it takes to be successful. And I think there's no more important principle than principle 5 that relates to technology and where we're going. You know, every business now is a technology company. It's just the reality of our world. In my company's business of marketing and advertising, technology has become the new normal. Companies are moving significant amounts of their budgets to mobile technology and advertising, you know, and furthermore, those companies that don't use real-time analytics, metrics, and technology are going to be left behind. You've got to start off with technology in mind and how it'll affect your product or service. It's so important. So I'll talk very briefly about how we use technology to automate our sales. Automated marketing solutions via social media really drive a lot of our sales for the company. So we're literally using the Pardots or the HubSpots and other types of software to capture significant leads in social media. Here on this particular slide, you see all of the social media inputs from Facebook to Twitter to WordPress that we pull from to engage with customers, to ultimately nurture them through conversations and providing substantive information to help them, help consumers, help customers get what they want, and to ultimately close and make them customers. One of the tools that really works well for us is Twitter. I must admit, I was very reluctant early on about Twitter, but Twitter has provided significant leads and significant revenue over the past 5 years for our company and for our clients. I'd say for Johnson Media alone, it's well over incremental increases in the hundreds of thousands, possibly millions in the next few years. And so if you're not on Twitter, if your company's not using Twitter, or any of the other social media platforms and automated marketing tools that take advantage of these platforms, I strongly encourage you to do that. It's worth the upfront cost and energy that goes into putting together those systems, because that is the future, and those companies that use these automated tools will ultimately be the most profitable. And so to give you a very quick example, and I'll use the book because you all are familiar with that. So what we did with the book is to actually separate the content, push it out via social media, and all the meanwhile have short links that lead to the blog, which ultimately lead to sales of the book. So that's just one quick example, an internal example of how we use the automation to increase sales and increase relationships, which ultimately, I think, coincidentally, lead to presentations like today. So definitely adopt that technology and use automated marketing solutions via social media. So principle 6, this is one of my favorites. Everybody should learn to sell. That is a lesson that I had to learn very quickly as a sophomore in college. As I alluded to earlier, I was a computer scientist. I didn't like to leave my home. I was quite of an introvert, but I learned very quickly that in order to be successful, I had to not only understand how to sell, but learn how to build a team that is sales focused. And in fact, that's even to this day something that I focus on even as president and CEO. I focus on sales every day and to make sure that we're really driving what makes business possible. And I strongly encourage entrepreneurs to focus on this particular skill and necessity for a successful business. I choose this photo because a lot of people have the misconception of what selling is. They think it's the oily or the unctuous used car salesman, and that's not what it's all about. There are different ways of selling. There are different personalities, and they're all acceptable. It's just you've got to understand how they all fit together in order to be able to make them work effectively. And so the next slide shows the 4 fundamental selling types or styles, and I really like these because it can help you identify your personality style and the personality style of the potential customer. And so we have an analytical personality, a driver, an amiable, and an expressive personality type. I'm more of the analytical. And so, you know, as I was selling very early in my company, I would sell to someone who was more relationship-based in an analytical way. And a lot of times it just didn't work. You know, I thought that the numbers made sense and that people would come to the realization on their own based on the data that I provided them that this service or this product was best for them. And it doesn't always work that way. Some people are more relationship-based and, you know, would like to go out on several lunches and really get to know the person that's selling and really get to know the company. So it's important that you match up your personality style, if you're the one selling, with the customer's personality style. And that makes a lot of difference, a huge difference. And so even if you're not the person that's doing the selling, I think it's important that you find people, a diverse sales team that knows how to sell to the different personality types. And for me, that made all the difference in my company. I'll tell a quick story. When I started my business, I had a magazine, and I went to one of the local shops, and there's an owner of a clothing store there. He said, "Kevin, I love your product. Your magazine is great, but I will never, ever buy from you." And naturally, my heart was broken. And I didn't leave, thank goodness. And I asked him very candidly. I said, "Why wouldn't you buy from me?" He says, "You know, your product is great. We understand the value of it, but, you know, we would prefer to buy from someone else." And I said, "Well, who would you like to buy from?" Pretty straightforward guy. And he said, "You know what, send your editor, Chelsea, to come talk with us." And I learned the subtleties and the nuances of selling at that moment. And I said, "No problem." So Chelsea and I returned, and we had a really good encounter and talked to them. And, you know, they just really wanted to talk and meet her. But to make a long story short, Chelsea ended up being Miss DC. So I learned my lesson then that it wasn't necessarily about the data or the product because they believed in it. It was just what they wanted for that particular moment, and they were great customers for years to come. So principle 7, ask the right questions. And this is another skill that's really helped to grow my business as well as other major businesses. And it's a very simple concept that everyone can learn. And it's applicable to relationships as well now outside of business. And so in business, you do not want to ask close-ended questions. And as you can see in this slide here, a close-ended question might be, have you identified all the hazards? Did you mitigate them? Did you secure your work area? So that's, those are all types of questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no. And they really don't offer a description of what the problem may be or what the solution may be. And you're often kind of leading the question. So, very effective salespeople, very effective entrepreneurs typically ask open-ended questions and can find information that's useful to provide a solution that the customer wants. So a sample open-ended question may be, what hazards have you identified? What are the consequences? How did you mitigate them? And so that's, a small change that will really, really bring immense dividends. So I strongly encourage you, as you're dealing with customers, as you're exploring ideas, that you force yourself to ask open-ended questions. And that even helps once you've acquired a customer. I use the example in the book of some open-ended questions that you can use to speed up the sales cycle. It's not so much, have you cut the check yet, right, which can be answered with a yes or no. It's, is it possible that this particular check could, what can we do to speed up the billing process? What other budgets are there within the company that this particular check could come from? And so you're really trying to push things along and find solutions when you ask open-ended questions. Principle 8, and this is kind of cliche, you hear it often, but I think it's so important. You want to find the right mentor. And I like to use another word in place of mentor. I like to say find the right advocate, because it's not so much learning from someone as much as it is getting something from them in an even exchange. I mean, you've got to offer your advocate something so that they'll want to give you business or provide an opportunity. And so one key, I think, to mastering this principle is finding someone who's done exactly what you want to do. It's difficult. It's easier said than done, but again, it will pay immense dividends. So find that person that has won $1 million contract. I know for us, that was very important for me. I found and was very fortunate in finding a mentor that was able to show me exactly what $1 million plus contract proposal looks like. That opened up so many doors, because a lot of us, we certainly have companies, we certainly have talent that can get the job done. A lot of times it's just a matter of seeing what a winning proposal looks like. And so you want to find that right advocate that can open up those type of doors and bring you in and create a relationship that's more intimate, that's closer than just a mentor. So principle 9, I will end with think big. Even though I end with this principle, it is the beginning principle of my book because I think it's so important. Thinking big is something that we hear quite often, but what is it? In business, thinking big simply means pursuing ideas that maximize the scope of your potential. And likewise, it can mean pursuing ideas that have a maximum impact in the world, right? We have a lot of social entrepreneurs today, especially those millennials like myself. And despite its simple definition, thinking big is difficult to do for many reasons. But if you're aware of those obstacles, you can avoid them altogether. And this particular chart here shows some of the fastest growing industries. And so if you don't have that refined idea, here are some opportunities that thrive, that are thriving, especially during this recession. And I think they represent huge, huge opportunities. And quite often, and I've learned this from experience, the effort that you put into thinking small often equals the energy and the resources that it takes to think big. So if you have that big idea, go for it, right? Don't be reluctant. Go for it. I think it's worth going for. because ultimately it'll yield bigger dividends and much more internal success. I like to use the word self-actualization. And for me, personally, that's a huge goal of mine and why I pursue entrepreneurship. And so I'll end with one of my favorite quotes, and in fact, it's one of the favorite quotes of the book, and it's by the great Benjamin E. Mays, who was the mentor, or dare I say advocate, for the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was born right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And the quote is, "It must be borne in mind that the tragedy in life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. It is not a disgrace not to reach the stars, but it is a disgrace to have no stars to reach for. Not failure, but low aim is a sin." So I love to end on that because it really captures the essence of why it is that we are entrepreneurs, why it is that we're seeking value and trying to create wealth and ultimately attain a certain level of success that I think benefits not only ourselves but society in a whole. So thank you very much, and I would love to entertain any questions, and feel free to reach out to me via Twitter or email if you don't get an opportunity to ask. I'm always here, and I'd love to help you in any way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. Again, this is Michelle Markey. We have a host of questions for you, so if you don't mind, I'll just read them off to you and we'll have a little discussion.
Sure.
Okay, so the first question is, in your view, are those who establish small and micro enterprises or maybe are self-employed, do you consider them to be entrepreneurs?
That is a very great question. You know, and I've gone back and forth in this, and ultimately I say yes. I think everyone, even those companies that are tens of thousands of employees or have tens of thousands of employees, you know, at one time those companies started with an individual or an idea or perhaps maybe a founder and co-founder. And so I attribute the term entrepreneur more to that visionary idea that can sort of transform a concept or an idea to a full-fledged business. So even though there are solopreneurs or individuals, I do think they're entrepreneurs, just at an earlier level, and hopefully, and it may not be in their interest to do this, but hopefully for the greater good of whatever that product or service that they're offering and for society, they'll be able to scale to the point where that company can provide more value, more services and products.
Great, absolutely. I would have to say that we fully are in agreement with that. When people consider themselves an entrepreneur, they tend to treat their endeavor with a closer business eye, which is a benefit to them. So thank you for that. Next question is from Katie, and she says that she keeps hearing that entrepreneurs need to solve problems, not create a product and then find a problem to solve. How does this relate to the idea of creating new markets?
Well, there are two sides of the conversation. So there is, of course, the idea that I talked about, and that's solving a problem. But then there's the other side of that approach, where there's solving a problem that people don't necessarily know they have, right? So, you know, and I think both work, and I think that's an awesome question. However, the statistics will show you that the probability of success is greater with finding a pain point that people realize that they already have. So, and there are exceptions to the rule. I did have a picture of Steve Jobs in the iPhone. And I think that's a category or product that was a completely new market, right?
Yeah.
In 2005, the iPhone didn't exist, and so we didn't realize we needed an iPhone or even a tablet or that until Steve Jobs let us know that we needed it. So there is an opportunity in going that route. It just may take a little bit longer for the market to develop, and you may need to put more resources into marketing and really putting together the case for why a customer or a client needs the particular product or service that you offer.
Great, thank you. Next question is from a different Katie. She's saying, I work with many aspiring entrepreneurs who have difficulty thinking their business through. How do we get them to do the necessary thought without the business plan?
There's actually a very structured approach that you can take, and that's put together, I believe, by Babson College, that literally takes people through the customer discovery process, and that's very, very, very helpful. I would love to share that with you. You can either email me or tweet me, but that's a very, again, structured process that entrepreneurs go through to understand who their customers are and what it's going to take in order to create a viable and sustainable business. So that information is out there, and I'd love to share it with you.
Excellent. I will offer a secondary resource as well. There is a fabulous video series that the foundation, the Kauffman Foundation, has done called Kauffman Founder School. And you can Google, it's founderschool.org. And on that, there are a couple video series that have been hosted by Steve Blank, specifically around the customer development process and the concepts around startup and those sorts of things as well. So for those of you that are looking for something additional to what Kevin's offering, that might be a next opportunity. So Kevin, more questions actually. So what this particular question is addressing is wishing for you to identify what motivated you personally as it came to starting a business, and is taking entrepreneurship courses, is that essential to help start? What are your views on that, and really what was your motivation?
Well, my original motivation was I was working at a particular job, and I realized that there wasn't necessarily that many opportunities for me in that particular environment. Specifically, my manager had asked me to create a tool to help her manage some of the employees, and she didn't know if I could do it or not. And I said, well, you know, it's kind of difficult, but I did it over the weekend and came back and said, hey, here's what you wanted. And so she was elated, and then she took it to her vice president, and let's just say she was very, or the VP was very upset. And so the VP said, you know, even though you've asked me to do this for 2 years, here you have the young guy who comes in and does it, and it was all a big mess. I think you get the gist of where I'm going with this. So, you know, I felt personally that if I had the talent to do it, that I should be enabled to do that, to help the customer and ultimately help with whatever initiative we are trying to accomplish. And so that's when I realized that my personal talents were of higher value elsewhere. And so I decided to pursue some ideas and some concepts that I had that I didn't necessarily think would be sustainable businesses, but would at least help me to develop my creative talents and hopefully make some money on the side. So I guess the long story short is I was a little bit peeved that within this particular structure, the corporate world, that I wasn't maximizing my potential. And I talked a little bit about that in the presentation, and I talk at length about that in the book, about thinking big and enabling yourself to grow. And so that was it for me. And so from that point, I started reading a lot of books. One of the first books that I read was Netscape Time, which actually chronicled the events of how Netscape ultimately beat Internet Explorer, or that's debatable. And I just kept reading lots of books about successful entrepreneurs and about entrepreneurship in general. So I do think that it is very necessary to continue learning, to, of course, listen to series like this wonderful one that the Kauffman Foundation has put together. And so, you know, being an entrepreneur requires you to learn on a consistent basis. I mean, technology, times are exponential, right? You know, there's so much technology out there. If you don't keep up, you'll get lost. So part of staying relevant, part of staying profitable, part of staying in business is continually educating yourself.
Excellent. I have to tell you, Kevin, you're getting some tremendous feedback. I have several more questions. So I'm hopeful that we have about 15 minutes. I'm hopeful we can get through some of them, but some really great questions for your inspirational talk here. Bren is asking if you believe there's a downside to introducing a product too early, such as with the 3D renderings before the prototype is made.
You know what? That's a difficult question, and I think my answer would be to really focus on that customer discovery part and making sure that the market is ready for whatever product or service that you have. You know, one of the great things about that is if you're a startup and you don't have many resources, there are a lot of universities, at least here in Atlanta, that will entertain entrepreneurs who need work done. So you could go and find an MBA class or perhaps an undergrad class that can help you with that customer discovery or the research to see how developed the market for whatever your product or service is. And I think that would be very, very helpful. And so, you know, when I started my company in 1999, we were offering banner advertisement and doing a lot of things, and a lot of companies weren't ready for that. And so even though we had a few wins, big wins in the beginning, I mentioned the NBA, they were advertisers online. Even though we had a few wins, it wasn't necessarily sustainable because a lot of companies didn't understand online advertising. So we eventually had to shut down our website because we pivoted and created a print magazine. So we kind of went back in time, if you will, and that was a cash cow, only to have to go back to the digital world, right, in 2008 when the market fell out and the print industry started to die. And so we were probably about 7 years, maybe 8 years ahead of our time in terms of digital advertising. And sometimes it takes that long. And so what you really have to do is, again, find that or seek out the research that will help you to gauge the market, and also take a good look at your resources to see if you can hang around that long. You know, I talk about Pandora. Pandora took 10 years to be profitable. Not many of us, especially if we're not funded well, would stick around for 10 years for a product or even a customer to develop. So those are all different factors and variables that you have to consider when you're introducing a new product to market. I'm very aggressive. I would say go ahead and put together that prototype, put together the effort, because you never know what will come from that. You may discover that there's an opportunity in pivoting just a little bit. But I think you learn a lot from creating that prototype, and it may not be in your interest to wait very long.
Excellent. So I have, if you don't mind, I have two questions because I think they're interesting dynamics possibly in your answer. So two separate questions. One was simply, do you believe in luck? And the second one was, being an entrepreneur is sometimes a lone wolf feeling. How do you motivate yourself to go on?
Great question. So, do I believe in luck? That is a very, for me, spiritual question, right?
Yeah.
But for the purposes of keeping it simple, you know, I think there is, I think you can create your own luck. as it were. One of our biggest contracts came through a little bit of luck, and I think we created that luck by focusing on our content, right? Positioning ourselves or positioning our company in the right place at the right time, or putting together the content that will capture a potential customer. So in this particular instance, we had a major account come through someone searching for financial services on Google. And it was so lucky, if you will, that I didn't believe the inquiry was true. And a very quick funny story, when the person reached out to me, they said, does your company do those Cadillac commercials where the ATS is driving in Morocco and all around the world? And so that was sort of a hint that said, I think they may be serious. I think this may be a big budget client. And so, you know, all of that came through positioning ourselves and focusing on our content marketing, such that if someone were to Google, you know, how do I find an advertising agency that specializes in financial services, ensuring that our information comes up in a Google search. So yes, I do believe in luck, but I think you create your own luck and being prepared and ready once that luck comes, because there's nothing worse than, you know, if an opportunity, once in a lifetime perhaps, opportunity comes across and you're not ready for it. The second part of the question, how do I motivate myself? I'll keep it very, very straightforward. So when I get down on myself, I turn up the music, I put on some salsa music, and I dance like nobody's looking, because that helps me to realize that there's a whole lot more in life than losing a major account or just being in the doldrums of this experience we call entrepreneurship. So music, doing something that just makes me happy, gets me out of the entrepreneurial rut that I may be in at that time, and working harder than I ever thought was possible. Also getting with other entrepreneurs. Often I speak in mastermind groups, and it's funny, it's sometimes to the point where I'm not giving advice, it's empathy, right? And sometimes you need that. I like to call it Entrepreneurs Anonymous, right? You get there and you talk about your battles, and that really helps to know that you've got support there. So for me, it's music, getting away and surrounding myself with people who have a similar experience and can motivate me.
Perfect. Perfect. Kevin, thank you so much. I've just really enjoyed your talk today, and ending on the high note of salsa dancing seems very appropriate. Perfect. We truly owe you a debt of gratitude. This was a wonderful talk, and we had a lot of questions for you, so thank you for engaging with us at such a positive level. For the rest of you, thank you so much for attending today's session. We have next month, I don't know if she's a salsa dancer, but I will tell you that we have an amazing author next month. In fact, the author series next month is going to be held on September 17th, and we have an author by the name of Dawn Fotopoulos, and her book is called Accounting for the Number Phobic. As soon as I saw that book title, I had to get the book, and in fact read the book, and it hits right in the sweet spot where so many entrepreneurs really find themselves struggling, and that is just a basic grasp of everyday business financials. And she makes the information immediately understandable and really, I think, relates well to those of us that are maybe a little bit less than confident in our accounting abilities as business owners. So please join us on September 17th and listen to Dawn. Until then, this webcast will be up on fasttrac.org within the next week or so, so look for that. And again, Kevin, thank you so very much for being with us today. We appreciate all your information, and We'll be looking for your book on your website and be looking for you on Twitter. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.